All that said, we are in lesson 27, continuing on our story of Israel now. A couple review questions to get us back on track, and then we will be getting into some more dodgy stuff with the Israelites here. From last week's lesson, what was significant about the tabernacle? Like, what was kind of the big thing about the tabernacle and its presentation to Israel?
Big on separation.
Big on separation. That was kind of an aspect of it, but the idea of the tabernacle, why was the tabernacle being given? What does tabernacle mean, I guess? What do you say, Beth?
Okay. I mean, like home or something, isn't it?
It's a dwelling place. Yeah, a tent, a dwelling place. For who? God, right? God, it's a noun and a verb, I think, in English. It's a noun and a verb. The tabernacle is a dwelling place. To tabernacle is to dwell amongst. God was actually going to come and dwell among the Israelite people. First time. This hadn't happened before. This was a very important thing.
It had to be built exactly what God ordered.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing. He had specifications,
Yeah.
and that was definitely part of it. So now that goes into my second question here. What does the design of the tabernacle reveal about Israel's relationship with God? You kind of mentioned it has to be God has the parameters, and Jesse, you mentioned something. The design of the tabernacle shows us what was one of the key things that kind of comes out there.
We're not holy enough to approach God.
We are not holy enough to approach Him. The separation, right? There's the holy of, I'm going to dwell among you, and you're going to put a curtain. And then you're going to put another curtain. And there's going to be a third curtain. Like, you are not allowed to come through these curtains. You're not allowed to access me because there's separation. I'm coming to live among you, and yet we are still separate. There is a relational problem here that I want visibly manifest here. When I come among you, I want you to see every single day, I'm here, you can't come to me because you are sinful people. I am a holy, righteous God. Who was allowed into the Holy of Holies? And when? The Holy of Holies being that inner, most special room where God says, I'm actually going to be there, my glory will be there. John?
The high priest and only on the Day of Atonement.
Very good. Exactly the case. He says, you got the high priest, the most eligible person you have, he's not allowed in here. If he comes, he's got to do all of these special things. What were some of the special things that had to be done for the most holy man among the Israelites to come before God? What was some of the stuff he had to do? Anybody remember that?
He had to wash.
He had to wash.
Dress in certain clothes.
Certain clothes.
Make a sacrifice.
Sacrifice, and I thought it was really cool. So the Day of Atonement is where the priest is going to go in and make atonement for collectively Israel. That's all of Israel's sins as a demonstration of all of Israel being sinful and needing to repent before God. The high priest will do that for them. Before he's even allowed to do that, he's got to make atonement for himself. He's like, hey, I want to come in and offer a sacrifice for the sins of the people. And God's like, you can't even come in here to do that until first you offer a sacrifice for yourself. Then you can offer a sacrifice for the people. Let me just push this point home. You are not worthy to come before me, even to come in a repentant way. There's steps to go through here. God is really wanting to push that, to teach them that principle. We're going to see they were slow in grasping it, slow in really absorbing this and taking this on as their identity. The idea of we are so sinful and unworthy wasn't something that really got held on to tightly by the Israelite people in a quick manner.
Woohoo, we're God's people.
It's so quickly went to that for whatever. I mean, again, it's the people thing. So Israel has received the law. They've entered into a covenant relationship with God. That's happened. They've been given a comprehensive sacrificial system. We just did a quick summary of the tabernacle. With the tabernacle, God lays out this whole system of these are the ways that you're going to come before me and not be made right before me, but kind of be deemed acceptable enough to not be wiped from the earth, right? I'm going to still count you as my chosen people, but you got to keep on doing this because you're constantly proving yourselves unworthy to be my chosen people. So they've got that set up. They've experienced numerous miracles right from the get-go, right? They've had the plagues, they've had the Red Sea, they've had the manna, they've had the water. They've had the visible presence of God. The glory of God has before their eyes settled in the tabernacle. The Shekinah glory comes out of there. They're seeing God's presence made manifest. That's all going on. they're at a place where we can look back and we're like, man, there's so much about God that the Jews don't know yet, right? There's so much that we have, that we've been given, that we can read about and have about God that we know that the Jews didn't have yet. But they had a lot. They've been given quite a unique look at the person of God. God has communicated directly to them from Mount Sinai and in all these other ways. They've gotten an idea of who he is. And what we're going to be seeing is how are they engaging with it? How are they engaging with what they know about God? How does sinful humanity engage with a righteous God when they're put in close proximity, right? As God reveals his righteousness, how does man measure up? As we'll be seeing that continually throughout the history of Israel here. And again, what I would encourage us to keep in mind through this is the nation of Israel, view them as a caricature of humanity. We all know how that works, right? You go to Disney World or something and say, hey, draw a picture of me. And the person makes the cartoon image of you. And it's like, if it's not going to look like you, but somebody define for me, what is that makes like a caricature different from just like a painting?
They take your flaws and make them bigger.
Take your flaws and make them bigger. They take like those, like, okay, what are the defining characteristics of that person? I'm going to accentuate them, right? So if someone has a little bit of a big nose, in the caricature they have a huge nose, right? Ears, and we see that, we're like, oh, that's this person, and obviously it's like goofy and highlighted, but the proportions are off, right? Because it accentuates the things that we'd all say, oh yeah, I see that present. So Uncle Deli's got the sideburns, right? In a caricature, much more prominent sideburns. One of the things you notice when you look at his face, those are a prominent thing, caricature would be much more so. With Israel, what we see is this is humanity, and the examples that were given in the Old Testament, it's like, yeah, I'm kind of like, this is human stuff, and God allows it to really go in a big way with Israel, so we can say, wow, okay, well, there's an accentuated version of humanity, not because they're freaks, not because, oh, they're this extreme wild card of people. It's like, no, what you're seeing, this extreme thing, by making it extreme, it's more easy, it attracts our attention to it, and we're like, oh yeah, wow, no, I see that in my life. That's a human thing. Like what I see with Israel, I'm like, oh, look at their sinfulness. God's like, okay, tone it down. That's in your life. Oh, man. Oh, look at this. Look how faithless they are. And, oh, look how faithless I am. That's kind of the help here. And if you consider with the story of Israel, there's a lot that God had to work from, right? The story goes, it's a long story. It covers hundreds of years. He specifically chose certain stories to record because like, these are the parts, the caricature traits that will help teach people in the future, right? That's the goal of this. And we're going to be looking at the section we're in here in Numbers. It goes into, he's presented the tabernacle, and now God is going to list off 7 unique instances of Israel disobeying him and defying him and rebelling against him and faithlessness. We're not going to cover all 7, but that is the thing. It's intentionally put, and the way it's put is even, you can see like a symmetry to it. These are intentionally given to us. It's not just a historical account, and on day 3 and on day 4, God is communicating to us about ourselves in the nation of Israel. And so I just encourage us, as we look at it, acknowledge the problem and be like, oh man, Israel, problem, and then try to bring it home. Be like, okay, this is a people problem that's being emphasized within the nation of Israel. If that makes sense. I find that's the best way for me to engage with this, because if I stop with, wow, look at how horrible those Israelite people were, what a faithless, godless, worthless group of people, and I stop there, that doesn't help anyone. That just makes me feel better about myself, and it's like, that's not, then I'm doing just what they were doing. So that's an ironic way to approach this, I guess. So let's not do that. Let's try to bring it home as we go. So jump to Numbers 13. Numbers 13, 1 through 3 is where we'll start. The Lord now said to Moses, send out men to explore the land of Canaan. They're right on the borderland. Send out men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites. Send one leader from each of the 12 ancestral tribes. So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He sent out 12 men, all tribal leaders of Israel, from their camp in the wilderness of Paran. A couple things to note in that. First, he didn't say pick 12 guys, one from each tribe. Pick 12 leaders, right? These are the headmen. These are the figureheads of their tribe. This is everyone in the tribe of Benjamin would have said, yeah, this guy, he represents us. He's the person we're already acknowledging as our leader in our little tribal group. Something to note there, so that when we get into the story here, these aren't just Joe Schmo of, the tribe of Levi. It's like, no, this is the representative that everyone would acknowledge as being the one of the heads of their group there. And also, I like that he says it right here. What's going on? Send the men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites. Go check out the land I am giving to you. I, the creator of all things, I, the God of the world, right? I, your Yahweh, who I've presented to you, am giving this land to you. Go check it out. Kick the tires a little bit. See what I'm giving you. It doesn't tell them, see if you think you can get this land. He's like, no, I'm giving it to you. Go check it out. Go do that. That's something to keep in mind as we get going on in the story here. And one of the things just to mention, God is like the only person who can ever do this, right? We know land disputes in the world are like a thing, right? Whose land is this? You say, well, it's the Americans, the Europeans, because we have this. Well, who had it before us? Well, some Native Americans. Well, who had it before them? Well, other Native Americans. Like, we're constantly fighting and bickering over land, and as amongst people, it's a legitimate complaint because it's all at the same level, fighting and bickering and taking and stealing, and it's kind of like, well, who stole it first? And that's a hard one to get. Amongst the Iski people, this was a constant, amongst themselves, constant fighting about land. Well, that was my uncle's land. Yeah, but before it was your uncle's land, it was my grandfather's land. But before it was his, it was, and it's this constant squabbling. Humans fighting over humans. God is the only one who can actually step in and be like, no, it's mine, and I'm giving it to you guys. So we have a little bit of land in our family. If we had squatters on our land, right, and the analogy breaks down because I have the deed, so we'll just say it's mine, because for all that talk I just did. We'll say it's my land. If squatters were there, and the squatters start fighting with each other about who gets to plant the garden. No, I want to plant it here. No, it's mine. Okay, I'm the guy actually, no, I'm going to let Bill come, and Bill's going to plant a garden here because it's my land. Like, you squatters, move. God does have the authority in this situation to do this, and it would do us well to remember that as we get into the story of the Jews going to the land of Canaan. It's not just the Jews going to the land of Canaan and taking it. It is God giving them the land of Canaan because it's his land to give them, and he can do that. It's not actually a big part of the story, but it's something just to keep in mind with the context because it does come into play. And it's one of the big criticisms of the Old Testament is, well, look, it's just genocide, or it's just, people fighting people. It's like, yes, but the reason that it's even put in here as a thing is God is the one who is dictating, these will be the boundaries that I will allot to you, Israel, right? So he's giving it to them here. I'm going to give this to you. Go check it out. Go down to Numbers 13:25. So they go in. After exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land, which is this massive cluster of grapes that took 2 guys to carry. It was so big. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces. But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as he stood before Moses. He was one of the guys who went in. Let's go at once and take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them we felt like grasshoppers, and that's what they thought too. A couple things to note with that. First off, their observations were accurate, I would assume. I mean, it seems like what they said. I don't know. We live in a pretty mixed culture, so Americans tend to have a pretty wide range of sizes and shapes among us. When we lived amongst the Iski, it was interesting. So they're more of a boxed-in society. They kind of, Papua New Guinea people it's just Papua New Guinea people. And so it would tend to be, on average, especially among the Iski, Papua New Guinea people are about that tall. So I was a giant among them. I kept saying, I'm actually a small guy. In the States, I'm a little guy. So whenever they would look at, like, missionaries would come in, and then you get like a big guy who's like, 6'3" or something. They're just like, holy cow, like, that's a huge person, because they're, 120 pounds is the average size of all the Iski guys. So you bring in fat Americans, and it's like, there's a size difference. I mean, if you were to put up two football teams, Americans and Iski people, there would be a hesitancy, right? Everybody's bigger. I think that's probably the reality. That's what they describe. Everybody's bigger than us. That is an intimidating thing. I don't know if you've ever done that. I don't remember what it was. I was just standing next to a hockey team once or something, and it struck me how large the athletes all were. When I was like, I am 5'9". Everyone here is over 6 foot, and these huge people. The legitimate complaint, right? If you were to be doing a military offensive, this is one of the things you'd want to know. How big are they? How strong are they? What do their forts look like? But they had something else that no one did, right? This wasn't just a military campaign. This wasn't just the Jews deciding where they're going to go. They had a promise from God. They had a promise from God that said, I will give this land to you. I am going to do that. He's already told them. Like, he didn't say, you go and do this. I am going to give this land to you. I mean, technically, I've already given it to you. I'm just telling you to go take it. But their response shows their heart, right? They're not trusting in God to provide for them. This was one of those ones where I look at it, I look at what they've just come off of. Like, Mount Sinai is the most recent thing that just happened. Like, hey, what happened last week? Oh, a mountain blew up. Like, it wasn't last week. It was a little while before, but right? There's this huge thing that just happened, and then the next thing that comes to, like, oh, no, we can't do it. God is worthless. God can't help us. I'm like, idiots! How could you be like this? That's my first reaction is like, come on! And then I back it up a little bit. Okay, so how could they not trust God after all he has done? Seth, how can you not trust God in your life after all he has done? Seth, do you believe that all of this is true? I do. I honestly do. I believe that this is true. Okay, what's the deal? Like, look at your life. Anyone could ask the same question of you, Seth, in your life. What is going on? Oh, shame. That one stung. But that's what we see here. Humanity. This is humanity. We see a faithless aspect there. Believing God always requires an element of faith, right? It doesn't matter what has gone before. Believing God for the next thing always requires an element of faith. Will he continue to be faithful? Can I believe that he'll actually do that thing? Can I believe that God is actually in control of my life, even though it feels like chaos, even though it feels like insurmountable things? Can I be trusting him to be faithful? Same question the Israelites had here, right? The same problem they were struggling with. It's one that I would be struggling with. Faith is a choice. Believing God requires faith, and faith is a choice. And faithlessness looks just as pathetic on me as it does on the Israelites, right? Because I think we'd read this story, and at first you said, man, losers. It's like, yes, Seth. And that's what you look like when you behave in this manner. When you don't trust God, that is an ugly look on you. And if you want to go to 14, it just helps flesh it out a little bit more. The situation. This wasn't just an initial knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, that was scary news, and we kind of responded emotionally. It's more than that. In chapter 14, verse 1, then the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. Their voices rose in great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? Then they plotted among themselves, let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. This is escalating, right? This isn't just oh, woe is me, I feel a little bit bad in my tent. They're taking action here. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground before the whole community of Israel. Two of the men who had explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, tore their clothing as a sign of distress and upsetness. They said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land, and if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land, flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord. Don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. But the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to all the Israelites at the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? Will they never believe me, even after all the miraculous signs I have done? right? This is a stance they were taking. Like, this is, again, pretty impressive show of disbelief. This wasn't just, I'm doubting a little bit. This is, I'm taking action, and I'm going to actively disbelieve what God has communicated here. And one of the things that stood out to me is I tend to kind of justify disbelief or a lack of faith. I'm like, oh, it's hard. It's hard to believe. It's hard to have faith. I'm kind of like maybe not quite up to snuff with that. That's not how God responded to this. It's like, well, yeah, believing me is hard. He took this as a direct affront, right? A direct insult to him. Like, hey, how long will I have to contend with these people? How long will they insult me in this way, right? By disbelieving me, by not believing that I am who I say I am. He took it as a pretty strong thing. To call God a liar is an evil thing. And that's what faithlessness is, right? When we say, oh, I don't believe what God is saying. I believe God is a liar, is another way to say that. And that's not a little thing, and God doesn't treat that as a little thing. I treat it like a little thing. There's always a reason, right, to sin. They had a reason to sin, but it was still sin. And when I choose to disbelieve God in whatever area of my life, it would be the same thing. It kind of struck me a little bit. Like, God's reaction is severe because their action against him is severe. To not believe something that God has said is it's just what Adam and Eve did, right? The initial sin of man was to not believe God. No, God, you are a liar. I'm going to believe something other than what you have told me. We excuse and condone sinfulness. God does not. And this would be one of those situations where God is going to call them on and be like, okay, I give grace. I give mercy. I deal with you. You've been whining a lot. I've been working with you. Okay, we're going to stop for a moment here. And I'm actually going to judge a little bit because this needs to be highlighted. What you're doing, the way that you're behaving is unacceptable. I'm calling a spade here. And that happens in Numbers 14:26. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long must I put up with this wicked community and its complaints about me? Yes, I have heard the complaints the Israelites are making against me. Now tell them this. As surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. You will all drop dead in this wilderness. Because you complained against me, every one of you who is 20 years old or older and was included in the registration will die. You will not enter and occupy the land I swore to give you. The only exceptions will be Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. You said your children would be carried off as plunder. Well, I will bring them safely into the land, and they will enjoy what you have despised. But as for you, you will drop dead in this wilderness. And your children will be like shepherds wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. In this way, they will pay for your faithlessness until the last of you lies dead in the wilderness. Because your men explored the land for 40 days, you must wander in the wilderness for 40 years, a year for each day, suffering the consequences of your sins. Right? Not suffering the consequences of your little doubts. This is a sin. You doubting me, you doubting what I said, you calling me a liar is a sin, and I am punishing your sin. You will all die out here. Why are you going to die? Because you refuse to believe me. You refuse to believe your God, and so you will be punished here with death. Death is the punishment for sin. I often forestall it. I am going to put that in here now. You will all see everybody who chose to disbelieve me now and call me a liar will be dead before you will continue on and see the benefits here. And it's almost comical, their response to this. So God says, you are not believing me, and I will punish you. And so Moses, in verse 39, when Moses reported the Lord's word to the Israelites, the people were filled with grief. Then they got up early the next morning and went to the top of the range of hills. Let's go, they said. We realize that we have sinned, but now we are ready to enter the land the Lord has promised us. It's like, But Moses said, why are you now disobeying the Lord's orders to return to the wilderness? I know we disobeyed you, God, and you said to go back here. Now I'm going to disobey you again, and I'm going to go. It's like, no, you're missing the point. The point is the disobedience. Moses said, why are you now disobeying the Lord's orders to return to the wilderness? It won't work. Do not go into the land now. You will only be crushed by your enemies, because the Lord is not with you. When you face the Amalekites and Canaanites in battle, you will be slaughtered. The Lord will abandon you because you have abandoned the Lord. But the people defiantly pushed ahead toward the hill country, even though neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant left the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in those hills came down and attacked them and chased them back as far as Hormah. You see here, it's not so much about the destination, right? It's God's big goal here isn't, I need to get these Jews somehow into Canaan. That's the most important thing. It's like, no, the most important thing is their heart in this situation. I want them to be believing me and trusting me as their God. That's what I want. You won't believe me? Okay, you're not going into Canaan. No, we can go into Canaan. No, you're still not believing me. There's a book that Rochelle and I were reading, and to my shame, we didn't finish it. Super good book. It's one of those actually a little bit too convicting, so I stopped reading it. It's called Shepherding a Child's Heart, and the idea behind it is you're not trying to discipline a kid to get behavior. You're trying to discipline a child to grow their heart. You're trying to get to that heart attitude. Why is this child rebelling against me? There's a heart issue there, and that's what I want to focus on, not how do I get him to do the things I want. How do I get him to actually, him or her, to actually get to a place where they're making good decisions, right? And obeying parents out of the good biblical principles. So that would be what God is doing here. God is looking to see heart change amongst the people. He's like, okay, no, you're not going to Israel. We're backing off here. I'm actually punishing this disobedience here so that you guys will learn from this. I want to see the nation of Israel come to a place of repentance and belief in the God that is leading them. We've all seen, and probably we've all done, the parent tactic of like, okay, you better get in the car, put your shoes on, we're going. Okay, come on now. 1, 2, 3. You better get the shoes on. And it's like we kind of make threats and do whatever, like, okay, you better do it. God does not do that, right? God's like, hey, believe me, we're going in. No, okay, fine, that's it. We're done. I'm punishing that sin. No, wait, God, we're ready. Okay, we're believing now. Look, we'll go. No, that ship has sailed. Like, there's no back and forth here. I'm not changing what I'm doing. The difference between God and me. You go on to Numbers 21. The story, right? Now they're in the wilderness for 40 years. That's a thing. That's going to be the new state that they're in. The next 40 years are the longest time out ever. Right? You're going to be punished for 40 years. Why are we in the desert for 40 years? Because you're being punished. Because remember all the time you disbelieved me and I said 40 years? That's what's happening here. So Numbers 21, jump a bit. Like I said, there's quite a few, 7, stories of disobedience in this section. And it's good to read through them all. We're just going to pick a couple highlights for the sake of time. But one of these next ones that, I thought was important and helpful later on in our story here, be in Numbers 21, if you go to verse 6, then the people of Israel set out from Mount Hor, taking the road to the Red Sea, to go around the land of Edom. But the people grew impatient with a long journey and began to speak against God and Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die here in the wilderness, they complained. There's nothing to eat here, nothing to drink. We hate this horrible manna. So why are they stuck in the wilderness, right? You see, they're deflecting, right? Moses, it's all your fault we're even out here. It's like, no. See Israelite history the last couple of years. Remember, why are we here? I'm not lost. I didn't forget where Canaan was. We are here because of your sin. That's not what I'm looking at. This is, I thought of it as the equivalent of a child who is put in timeout, and you're like, okay, you've been a horrible, disobedient child. I'm putting you in timeout over here in the corner. Like, oh, this corner is so boring. Mom, you're the worst mom. I'm so bored. Why am I in this corner? It's like, are you kidding me? You're literally in punishment right now. Like, I'm literally punishing you for disobedience, and you're blaming me. And this was another one of those, like, oh, look at these stupid people. I was like, oh, wait. This is a Seth thing. This is something I would do. Oh, why are there these negative consequences in my life? Why are there these difficult things? Why is my family dysfunctional? Why am I fighting with my wife? Why are my children not obeying? Because you're an idiot, Seth. Because there's so much that you do in your life that causes problems, and there's so much sin in other people's lives. Like, this is a sin thing. This is a human problem thing. Stop, Seth, yelling at me, says God. This is consequences of your sin. Israelites, this is the consequence of your sin is the reason you're stuck in the wilderness with nothing but manna. Technically, manna should have been food for a couple weeks to get them to the promised land. That was kind of the design of it. Well, now they're stuck eating manna for 40 years. Yeah, that does suck. That's a horrible setup for people because we all like variety and stuff. but it's their fault, right? It's their fault, but that's not how we see them responding. Right? They go and they deflect that blame and cast it on God. I would say that is another human tendency to deflect issues off of us. And God, look at this horrible thing over here. God must be a bad God. That's a way of looking at it. It's a normal human way of looking at it, an inappropriate way of looking at it. And God responds in verse 6, famous response of God. So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among the people, and many were bitten and died. Then the people came to Moses and cried out, we have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take away the snakes. So Moses prayed for the people. I did think it was kind of cool because they're in punishment right now, right? They're receiving judgment right now, and the response was, what's the problem with Moses? Like, what, poor me, poor me. Then the punishment gets a bit more acute, and finally they're like, oh, this is our fault. Like, there's a sin issue here. Please tell God we're sorry. We're recognizing the sin going on. So it is kind of a cool thing. You see it, that finally they're starting to get it, put a little bit more pressure. They're understanding the situation a little bit. Then the Lord told Moses, make a replica of a poisonous snake and attach it to a pole. All who are bitten will live if they simply look at it. So Moses made a snake out of bronze and attached it to a pole. Then anyone who was bitten by a snake could look at the bronze snake and be healed. One of those stories later on in Scripture, I think we would all know that this gets highlighted in a pretty important way in the New Testament. Jesus himself references this story, so we know this is a teaching moment. This was recorded for our benefit. It was recorded with intent behind it. Like this story will be on the test, right? Later on, it's coming up. So we'll pause a little bit to look at it because there is a picture here. There's a typology, right? God is saying, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to put a situation here that I expect to be referred back to as a testament of how I deal with people, how I deal with humanity. Here's the people who deserve judgment. They deserve to be punished because in their punishment, they're rebelling against God. And so he punishes them again for that. They deserve to die, right? Because they are calling, well, they're calling God lots of things. We hate this horrible manna, so we hate the miracle bread. We hate the sustenance that God is giving us. We hate that we're out here. What's wrong with all of you guys? Right, that's all going on. They deserve judgment from God, and yet God, in his grace, says, okay, I'm going to give you a means of salvation here. I'm going to make a way for you to be saved from the judgment that you're experiencing right now. You sinned. You are dying. Here is a way for you to be saved from dying. First off, it's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. Here's some ointment. Get a cactus and do the thing. It's not that. It's I'm going to make a thing. I'm going to make a symbol. It's actually a symbol of your sin, right? Because the snakes are there because of their sin. I'm making a symbol of your sin. I'm going to put it up on a stick. I'm going to elevate it on a stick. And when you look to this, when you believe that this will save you and you look to it, you will be saved. You will not die. For anyone who looks to the symbol that I put up on a stick for your salvation, when you look to that, you will literally be saved from death. You'll literally be saved from your judgment by looking at this symbol that I'm going to elevate amongst you in the camp. Pretty thick typology, right? We would see that. And that's what God is going for there. God's solution defies logic. The only reason that you would believe this would work is because you believe the God behind the promise. This doesn't... Moses, we're dying. The snakes are biting us. We're swelling up. We're dying. What do we do? Well, I've made this statue. Come look at it. No. Sorry, we wanted a solution, not an art project. Like, we're looking for help here. No, because God has said this is the way to be saved, this one way. If you believe God, if you believe that God can save you, if you believe that God will save you, look to this statue and you will be saved. Again, not because of the magic of the statue, but because of the God behind it. And we're just going to leave it with those two stories. We'll kind of be the end of it. It's just kind of an example there. But I think you guys have all noticed there's kind of a repetition. It's almost like, hey, isn't this the same sermon we had like 2 weeks ago, just with some different details like, oh, look, faithless people. Oh, look, faithful God. Oh, look, people who deserve judgment. Oh, look, a God who gives grace. Yes, that is exactly what we see. And we see these themes repeated over and over in Scripture because we are people, we need to hear it lots of times. I mean, it took Israel hundreds of years, thousands of years to be able to get this, and I think that's what God is pushing with this. We need to grasp these truths. We need to grasp our sinfulness. We need to grasp that we have a problem accessing a righteous God. There is a righteous God who exists, and I can't connect to him on my own. And every time we try as people, it's quite pathetic, and it has disastrous results for us. And I think there's that idea of, again, I guess I'm speaking from my own perspective and assuming that it's kind of true for other people as well. We don't like to think about this part of the Bible tons. I don't like to think about how deserving of judgment I am, or the people that I love, how deserving they are. I don't like that. I want to kind of, yes, it's true, and then go over to this other. I want to get to the happy stuff. Come on, I know there's good stuff in here. Where are the red letters? Like, I want to get to the stuff that says, all is well with my soul. We'll get there. But first, let's settle here. When I injured my hand with the angle grinder, I don't know if anybody knows how angle grinder works. It's not like a saw blade of metal. It's like a fibrous, like a cement type material with fibers all through it and stuff. So when it exploded and ripped off the back of my hand, it also put about 100 little pieces of like steel wool with gravel in it. And it stuck to the meat of my hand. So they're like, oh, we'll wash that off. And I was like, no, you won't. It's embedded, holding on. So they were like, pick, pick, pick. And they were going through it. And I asked the doctor several times, can we not do this? Is there a way to skip this part? Like, clean it up. What about some stitches? Let's just cover the hole. And like, no, we need to get into the wound. We need to find all of the problems and pieces and things that are going to cause infection. Like, if we don't do this, you will lose your hand. This will be a festering, disgusting wound, and you'll lose your hand if we don't get the foreign material out. So it started off with a cursory look. They looked at it, and they said, here's what we can see, and they pick it off. Then they take x-rays, and like, oh, there's actually pieces further in that we can't get at. That was fun. That was another experience. That was horrible. Local anesthetic. Always go for ketamine if it's offered. Always take the knockout drug. But then say, okay, now we're going to go deeper. We're really going to dig in for these ones. And so we're going to send to a specialist for that, to really dig out that wound, because we got to get this stuff. The specialist, when I go to him, he says, actually, so there was that your doctor saw with x-ray. There's other stuff in this knuckle here that I, as a specialist, am able to see is the fluid leaking out, his knuckle fluid, and there's more problems in here that I need to get at that the other doctors didn't even see. Illustration of kind of what God is doing here. He's showing us, let's dig deeper and deeper into humanity's problem. Let me put this on display, the issues that are at hand, the problem of the human heart. Let's really dig this out. Let's really open it up. Let's really see how deep and dark your hearts are. Let's really see the depravity of humanity. Let's really see how disobedient people can be. And let me just show this to you on multiple levels. We're getting to see that here with the people of Israel. And for me, that has been encouraging in a way to just, again, see, wow, look at that there. And then I see that little nugget of it in my life. Because it's easy to see the big wound. And then you got to actually look and take the time to find all that little stuff. But it's important that we look at how extensive is this wound. This isn't just a big cut in the back of your hand, Seth. There's nuance to it. There's depth to it. We need to actually understand how big that is, because if we just gloss on it, oh, there's a cut, let's sew it up, let's cover it. Yeah, there's a problem we need to fix. No, you don't get how big of a problem there is to fix. And if you don't get that, that's going to continue to fester up later on. It's going to continue to give you problems because you haven't actually acknowledged how deep this injury goes. And that's my thought as I'm engaging with this. God is taking the time to show how deep our problem is, how vast the expanse is of our separation from him, and just how bad humans are. Is what I'm gaining from this. So I'm not going to give any specific applications of this is the thing you should learn from this, because I think there's too much. What I would just say is a recommendation. If you were to read Numbers 11 through 21, I would say skip some of the, there's some lengthy and when you sacrifice a dove, do this. You can skip that. I give you permission to skip that. But read through the different, there's 7 different stories of disobedience of the Israelite people. And what is a good exercise would be to read through that and say, how are they disobeying? What sort of faithlessness am I looking at here in their life? And then how am I similar? Where's my similarity? Just to explore the depths of our own depravity was a helpful thing that I was doing as I went through this, and I thought it might be helpful for us en masse as well. What's the focus of the complaining / disobedience being highlighted in the story? Where is this reaction present in my daily life? Again, we know there's more to the story, but it's a helpful exercise to say, okay, what is God teaching me through this? What can I be learning through this? Then having that knowledge can be very helpful in identifying those qualities in our daily circumstances. You guys know, what's it called? Sociology? Oh, I don't remember what the term is that. Sociology? Oh, a case study. Like when people go into a store, they'll be like, okay, they'll watch like how people are buying, and they're like, oh, look, the things on the shelf that are at head level, people are going to buy that more often. So like they're studying how people behave. I've always loved those. I think it's super cool. How do people behave when they don't know they're being watched? And like you get to see this is how people behave, right? And realize everybody's like, oh no, I buy Oreo cookies because they're my favorite. No, you buy Oreo cookies mostly because they're put in the place where the favorite cookies get taken. Like you could put, rice cakes there, and there's a good chance that people buy more rice cakes, type of thing. I looked at the Old Testament as that, of kind of the case study of humanity. Like, oh look, this is how people respond. And then knowing that, now when I go into a store, I'll be like, oh, what cereal am I going to buy? I'm like, I'm checking the bottom shelf, because that's probably where the actual cheap stuff is that I'm looking for. Kind of like it lets you know a little bit, like, what's it called? Little hack, life hack. Oh, people generally respond like this, and me being a people generally respond like this. So now I know that, and I see myself responding like that, and I'm going to think about it. Ooh, all right. This is my natural bent, and now I can at least pause to consider it. I thought it was interesting like that. That's where I'll leave it for today. Next week, we are going to cover quite a bit of Israelite history in one lesson. Go through some conquest and Judges and up to Kings a little bit. We'll be moving some. And very soon, beginning of the New Testament, which I'm excited about. Kind of why we're doing this and wanting to get to that New Testament stuff, but I want to give that good backdrop as we go.